This is a very short video I've created to help people who are dating and looking perhaps for a marriage eternal companion. It's called the ABCs of dating. The A represents aligning values, finding someone you like, someone you might love, someone you might be compatible with, someone who has the same values and desires and passions. Studies have shown that the real focus of your efforts while dating is to find someone who's right for you, and it's only after that that you make a decision about getting married or not. We have to talk a little bit about homogamy. Homogamy is the tendency to pair off with another person who is similar to us in values, goals, desires, religiosity, spirituality, and other factors that are important to you. The best thing you can do is know yourself, and then you'll be able to tell when you come across someone you find is similar enough to you to make a strong commitment. When a couple that's done their homework together does decide to get married because they can see a lot of similarity in purpose and life goals, and then they get married, they marry with a lot less anxiety and the transition is a lot easier. So at this point I want you to pause the video so you can see these categories and this set of instructions, and you can pause it as long as you want. You can even come back to it after you've taken some real time to think and ponder about it. What are at least two desires you have in each of these areas of attraction? Emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, and physical. Decades ago, a researcher named Robert Merstein studied how people are attracted to one another, and he observed that something about them seemed promising or hopeful or appealing, and so they initiated some way. Dating is often one of them. Social media apps are another one, like dating apps. But they significantly begin to look more at the person, and hopefully that person wants to look more at them. And as they talk, discuss, spend time together if possible in person, compare each other's life course and goals and values, when they find someone they're feeling comfortable with, in other words, someone who's probably more like themselves with the same values and goals, then he found they start setting up roles. What kind of roles? Fiance, engagement, and married. Typically, it's an attraction with a significant effort in comparing values, followed by roles. I like to take Merstein's stimulus value roles and put them on this axis where, from the first encounter, which is in the bottom left corner, over time, two people can begin to compare values, and typically this requires more online and or in-person time spent together. Often it's physical first. It's not the physical's better than the other, appearance, attraction, build, things like that. It's just that it's the easiest one to notice with the least interaction possible in the shortest amount of time. But physical typically doesn't last over time. The more time and interaction spent together, one begins to see the values, the social and emotional and intellectual nature of the other person. This is where homogamy can be looked for and established. The spiritual aspects can be hinted to and discovered the whole time, from the beginning all the way through. But it does take more interaction and more time for intimacy to be established. And we're about to talk about what that means, intimacy. It has nothing to do with kissing and physical things. It's an ability to trust one another when you're vulnerable. So over time, stimulus value roles could lead to marriage, cohabitation, engagement, and other things. This video is really specifically about finding an eternal companion. That brings us to the B in the ABCs of dating. Be wise, yet harmless. Be wise about protecting yourself, yet harmless about hurting other people. It's okay to say no. It is absolutely okay to say thank you, but no thank you. And it's okay to be honest. If you can't be honest, then the risk of mismatching yourself to someone, no matter how cool it feels at the time or no matter how pressured you might feel for whatever reason that you might feel pressure, it requires honesty and trust. I'm going to share this principle that will take some of the pressure off and allow you to be more in tune with your own values, needs, and wants in this process. The question I was asked for over 3 decades as a university professor is this question about, is there really only one person you could truly be happy with in this life? If that were true, it'd be sad. Maybe there's more like 12 people you could be happy with. 4 you might be able to pair off with in your 20s, 4 in your 30s, 4 more or 4 others in your 40s, and 4 in your 50s and later in life. Our individual needs change as our life stages change and as our life experiences come upon us. And the idea that you have one and only is rare, and it isn't supported by the research, but it does occur. I have heard cases of 4 different couples where shortly after they were married, their eternal companion died for some reason. Cancer, an accident, or some other thing happened, but their companion suddenly died. It's important to think about these extreme cases because God is a merciful God. And like the story of Ruth and Boaz, there are second chances for everybody. And even if you think this one delightful person is the only person like this person that will ever cross your path in life, there's probably a few more out there. I want to tell you about a book. It's available and used in new forms online. You can order it. How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk. This book was written by a researcher, university professor who wanted to know that, especially for women, sometimes it isn't obvious who is a jerk and a future abuser and who's actually safe. So in his research studies, he identified both warning signs and patterns that will allow you to find out before you make any commitments. If you don't read the book, you might miss out, so I urge you to find it or find at least some reviews on it. But Van Epp says some bold things. He said, don't get too physical early in the relationship. And he said, don't make commitments about your roles before 90 days have passed. 90, that's about 3 months. That came across as bold, but his research shows that there's wisdom in this strategy. Not too much physical arousing affection early and not making commitments too early. His research shows that over the 90 days of a trial period of dating and courting and getting to know one another, you should always know the person before you give them too much trust. And then you should know them and then trust them more than you rely on them. That early reliance creates patterns of dependence that make people feel, especially women, like they owe the other person something when really they don't. So know the person more than you trust them. Rely on the person more than you commit to the person. And then after about 90 days, when you feel safe with knowing and trusting and relying and make a commitment, have touch that you find to be appropriate for the situation. He says, making out too much or especially full sexual expression tricks especially the woman because of the oxytocin trick, and he describes that in his book. Oxytocin is a powerful hormone that creates a sense of love and connection and bonding. Men get it in very small doses compared to women, and men will get it more as they age, but women will have it more early in their lives and throughout their aging process than men do. So it's important not to let that molecule trick you in any way. That brings us to the C of the ABCs of dating. Choose with confidence. The Lord Jesus Christ loves marriage. He honors it. He supports it. And He wants to answer the righteous, prayerful desires in our single women in our day the way He did over the course of the Old and the New Testament. He's going to support you, and He's going to help you as you pray and draw closer to Him in the searching process. One of the major theories used to study how people date and pair off and find a spouse and eternal companion is called the social exchange theory. It's very simple. Each of us should be trying to maximize his or her rewards and minimize his or her losses or the cost or the expenses of making a commitment to one person. That's why we had you pause the video early on and find out at least two of the desires you have in each of these areas of attraction: emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, physical. Some people throw in there as part of the physical the earning power and the house and the prestige of what the other person's doing. Some people throw in there the religious activity in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is part of the spiritual. Some throw in there similar goals and social needs. There are a lot of things you can throw in, but the idea is if you can get at least 2/3, how about maybe even 1/2 of your desired traits and attractions in the other person, you can have some confidence if there's strong homogamy that it's enough. But what about intimacy? What does that mean, intimacy? Intimacy is about being able to be vulnerable and being able to establish a mutual trust. It's a safety that you need to feel. You might feel it early on, you might feel it over time, but intimacy really means that you found someone that gets you and you get, and that you can disclose that you're not a perfect person to. And sometimes, dating people don't say, I need to tell you that I'm imperfect and here's 4 ways that I'm imperfect. It's more like when you're together online or in person, you notice the other person's faiblesse and weakness and things that might not be as appealing, but you also know you have some of those. So when the other person has less than desirable traits that aren't completely disqualifying, and so do you, and they're similar, we call that homogamy. Nobody finds perfect homogamy ever. It just isn't possible. But many people do find enough homogamy, enough trust. I'm showing you 2 different potential couples here. The more that you go into the zone of vulnerability, which is that zone where the blue pointed pyramid is, it's where the red box that says risk and fear and hurt and pain and emotional nakedness and your past experiences and feelings of being exposed as a flawed person. That's called risk taking, with a healthy dose of risk from both parties involved. The difference in people who cohabit or just date and people who marry is significant. The marriers, it has been said, are the people who finish their parachuting jump school and then actually jump out of an airplane, while the others who don't ever marry but just play in the market or cohabit, they're the people who practiced and prepared and graduated parachuting jump school, and that's enough for them. So they're very happy not to take the risk. But all the resources that come with being married, financial, psychological, health, social, emotional, all the resources that we find that are so much more apparent and present among married people compared to never married people, they only show up when people can go in the zone of vulnerability together, jump out of that plane together, and work through it. I only really ever recommend two books to single women who are dating to find an eternal companion. The one was How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk, and the other one is called The Five Love Languages for Singles. Gary Chapman created these five love languages. He has a free assessment you can do online, so you don't have to buy the book, although I've read that book and given copies of it to a number of my students in different universities. It helps you to understand how you and the other person you're considering for marriage might actually be in love. You just speak a slightly different dialect of the love languages that he has identified. I put a link in the show more below this video on YouTube that'll give you a free assessment of your five love languages. And if you find someone special, you can have that person also take the other half of the assessment, and then they'll compare them for you and give you both some feedback about how you might interact better together, understanding each other's love language and dialects. So there you have some ideas to consider. Nobody's a dating expert, but there's a lot of good research that can support anybody's efforts to align their values with another person and make sure they're homogamous, and to be wise and understand themselves and what intimacy is to them, and then to make that choice with confidence after giving yourself and your body a fair chance to see clearly what it is you want.